Hello and welcome to Chaos to Clarity, the podcast that's your compass to navigate the exciting world of service-based businesses. If you're a determined woman in your current business adventure, striving to conquer the chaos and build your empire, then you are in the right place. I'm your host, Maggie, your go-to business bestie and chaos navigator. I've spent nearly 2 decades in the service-based industry, building a photography business, a yoga studio, and now a thriving coaching practice. I've cracked the code to consistent income without all the chaos and noise. So get ready to increase your business growth, connect with your ideal clients, and find ease in both business and in life. It's time to turn your frustrations into inspiration and your chaos into clarity. So go ahead and grab your coffee, a pen and paper, and let's dive into the journey of building your dream service-based business together. Are you ready? Let's go. All right, everyone, welcome back to the Chaos to Clarity podcast. My name is Maggie. I am your host and the creator of the Chaos to Clarity coaching method. Today, I have Suzy with me, and I am so excited to introduce you all to her. So, Suzy, I'm going to let you take it away. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do, who you serve, and how long you've been in business?
Yeah, thanks so much, Maggie, for having me on. I'm Suzy Wraines, and I am an entrepreneur coach for women who are leaving a medical profession to start their own business. I work with them specifically on setting the foundation of their business, and that's all the planning that goes into it. So all the way from their vision and everything in between at a high level. So it really helps them know exactly what they want to do and how to get started. So that's what I do. And I'm a full-time RVer with my husband. We have 2 dogs and 2 cats that we bring with us. And we travel the country right now. We are in Colorado.
I
And
love that.
I think I missed a question. Oh, how long have I been in business?
Yeah.
And I'm also a podcast host. I have my own podcast, Starting a Business Simplified, and I have been in business for 18 months.
Cool. I love that so much. That's so awesome. And really, knowing that you are someone who helps people start out at that foundational level. And I know we've had conversations before, and you've talked about kind of being that kindergarten teacher where you are really helping people understand the basics and just understand what their vision is and starting to bring that to life. I think that's so important.
Yeah, and I can tell you a little bit of history of where that came from if you want me to go into that.
For sure.
Yeah. Okay, so I have a business administration degree in health. It's human resources, specializing in human resources, and I worked in corporate business for almost 20 years and did that for a while. And then I joined the Army, and I was a medic in the Army, so I learned about the medical side of the world. And then when I left the Army, I went into veterinary medicine, so I learned about the animal medicine side of the world. So I kind of got both sides. And the medical field for me was my passion. I loved it. I loved helping people, but I just really needed to do it on my own terms. The stress, the structure, the stress, the long hours, the not, just all the sacrifices you have to make just to be in the medical profession.
Right.
And so I ended up getting my health and life coaching certification. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to start my own business. I have a business degree and I've written a business plan before. I know what to do, blah, blah, blah. No, I didn't. I'm just going to be honest.
I don't think any of us do.
No. And it was an aha moment for me because I was like, I kind of don't want to do health coaching. And I kind of don't want to do life coaching, but that's what I got certified in. I was like, but what do I love? And what kept coming up for me is I love the business. I love the setting things up and really thinking seeing the end result and going, okay, how are we going to get there?
Yeah.
And then doing those steps. And so that's when I realized that I started to do some market research, and I was asking some coaches, consultants, people that I had gotten to know on my journey, and none of them had written plans. And a business plan is really for funding. I mean, people write them to get money. They go to a bank, they get a business loan, or they go get investors or whatever, or if they're going to do partnerships. And as a solopreneur, we don't really need that.
Right.
And so the light bulb went off and I went, but we need something.
Mm-hmm.
We need something that is a good foundational roadmap for where we're going. And so I thought, you know what, I'm going to simplify this. And then that's how Business Simplified LLC was born. Because I was like, I'm just going to be the basic person. We're back to basics. And I'm just going to help them lay that foundation. And then you can grow from there and just go into the different areas that you know you need to do more with your marketing plan, do more with your operations, do more with your finance, and
Right.
get more detailed in other ways with other people. But I'm like you said, one of my clients actually coined that. She's like, you're like the kindergarten teacher for business. And I'm like, I like that, because really
Yeah.
we're learning our ABCs and our 1, 2, 3s, and then I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to refer you off to the next, first grade.
Right. Right. And I think that's so important, right? Because especially when you start a business and you're just so excited and you go all in and you're like, yeah, I'm just going to do this. I know I had this happen to me when I started my photography business. I didn't have a plan other than, okay, go out, get clients, take photos, and give photos back, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
that was the plan, collect some money in there. And there were so many times that throughout the last 16 years that I'm like, I probably should have written a better business plan because, like, what is the longevity? When do you raise prices? What do you do this? Like, what is the end goal for your business? Are you building a business to then sell it? Are you building a business just for the rest of your life? Like, what is your exit plan? All of that stuff. Even with my yoga studio, when it got to the point where I was done, right? So in 2020, I was like, yep, okay, done. Don't want to do this anymore. I was like, now what? Like, what do
Now
I
what do I
do?
do?
What
Yeah.
do I do with this business? I don't. And somebody said, well, you need an exit plan. Don't you have an exit plan? Didn't you do that in your business planning? And I was like, no, no. Who goes into business thinking about their exit? But now, like, having moved through some of that, I'm like, yeah, it probably would be a really great idea to, like, and I've done it more for my coaching business, right? Thought up a plan of, like, okay, here are some logical steps. Here are things that I want to do. But knowing that there's someone like you out there who literally takes you by the hand and says, okay, here's step one, here's step two, here's step three. It really can be this easy. I think that is probably the most important piece of this, is that when you can simplify things as much as possible, your business feels so much easier to show up in, right? It doesn't feel like this scary thing, right? It turns into this, like, oh, okay, today we're learning about the letter E. Great. Let's show up and do that thing, right? Or whatever it is. And I feel like that makes planning for your business, it like just makes things simple, right? It brings ease.
Yeah, that was where I sat down to do my business, and it took me 6 years to figure out what I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
And part of it was because I didn't have a plan. I just sat down and started doing stuff. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I have my coaching certification. I'm just going to go get clients, just like you. I'm going to go get
Right.
clients, and I'm just going to
Yeah.
make money. And it's just going to, and I have a business degree. I've written business plans and I know what I'm doing. And yet it was still hard for me. So that's what
Mm-hmm.
the light bulb went off. And I was like, if it was hard for me to figure this out, then by certain it is way harder for people who don't have a business background at all, that haven't even done anything at all.
Right.
And I hit there's controversy around business planning. I'm not
Oh,
sure if you know
totally.
this.
Oh, absolutely.
You tell people, like, what's your business plan? Like, I don't need a business plan. And I'm like, okay, let's take the word business away. Do you have
Right.
a plan?
Yeah. Right.
Because we plan every day that we don't realize. When you set your alarm to get up in the morning, that was a plan.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yes.
planned to get up at 6 a.m. when your alarm went off. And then
Mm-hmm.
what are you going to wear? When you
Right.
think through, oh, I have a meeting that I have to look professional. Okay, so I need to look at my clothes. You're planning. And what I think is so, it's frustrating for me is because I get this back all the time. People are like, I don't need a plan. I don't need you. I don't need, and I'm like, you plan every day on how to just be in the world. Like, why would you not want to do that in your
Right.
business?
Yes. Yes. Oh, yeah. And I think there's just as much controversy around a business plan as there is around creating conversation in your business, right? The elusive cold DM that I get. I don't necessarily get into arguments, but I definitely get into disagreements with people about DMing, right? And I feel like it's the same is probably true for business planning, where like if you have a business plan, you've kind of got this roadmap laid out where you're like, okay, I kind of know where I'm going, and I know I'm going to have a few right and lefts, and we're going to take those when we get there. And we're just going to see how it goes, but I have this general direction. I know the end goal, or a goal anyway. Same thing with conversations and DMs. I've had people tell me, I don't need to DM anyone to get clients. And I'm like, oh, really? If you're not having conversations with potential clients or collaboration partners, referral partners, if you're not having those conversations with people, how are you attracting clients? Because simply posting on social media or sending an email out is probably not going to garner many clients. It may bring a few in, yes, absolutely, but it's probably not going to bring the high ticket clients that you want in, right? So how are you going to plan for that? You have to have a conversation. And this is where I get into with a lot of my clients. I give them this bakery analogy where I'm like, okay, you've opened your bakery, right? You've decided to do this thing, and you're in the back, you're cooking, you're making all of these amazing things. You're making cakes and pastries and this and that. People are walking past on the street and they're like, oh my goodness, where is this smell coming from? It smells divine. But your open light is off and your doors are locked. So they just keep walking. They're like, oh, somebody must be baking today. And they just keep going. But when you have a plan, when you unlock the door, when you turn the open sign on, and maybe you give out a couple free samples, right? You start going up to people to say, hey, I am a baker. I just opened up. I've got this sample. Would you like to try some? It's whatever, vanilla ice cream cake. I don't know, right? But would you like to try some? That's the start of a conversation, right? That's like your content that you're creating, whether it's email, whether it's social media, it doesn't matter. You're starting that conversation to say, hi, I do this thing, and like, would you like to try some? Would you like to try some with me? And people are going to say yes or no, right? And if yes, great, then let's have a further conversation. If no, great, they're not your client, right?
That's okay too. Yeah.
Yeah, like if I didn't plan for some of that stuff, right? To say, okay, here, when people say yes, here's what I want to do. When people say no, okay, here's what I'm going to do. Have that plan then makes those yeses and the nos a lot more bearable, right? Especially the no's. And I think,
yeah, and sometimes you get a no that is actually a maybe, or you get a no that when you have something different that you're launching,
right,
they're extremely interested in. So it's like keeping those no people in on the side and say, okay, now when I launch this other service, I'm going to reach out to them again.
right.
And because it's different, and they may be like, oh yeah, that's totally something I want to do. I didn't want to do the other thing, but I do want to do this thing.
Right.
And I love that you are bringing this conversation up, because that's part of the planning process too, is where are you going to talk to people?
Yeah.
And what are you going to say? Or how are you going to tell them? Like, okay, example, you introduced me on your podcast. Yeah. Hey, Suzy, tell us a little more about yourself and who you serve and what you do. If you don't know what that is or how to say it, then you can't start a conversation.
Right. Yeah.
So it's like, where are your people that you want to serve? And how are you going to generate those conversations? And how are you going to share with them who you are and what you do so that they can say yes or no?
Right. Right. Yes. Yeah. And I'm always so amazed when sometimes when people hop on the podcast, they don't really know how to introduce themselves. And that question, like, tell us about yourself, is very hard for people to answer sometimes. And that, to me, that sometimes shocks me, especially like some of the people that I've had on here. And this is no dig to anyone, right? It's just an observation that I've noticed, is that everyone introduces themselves a little bit differently, which is great. And I love it. But also some people, they just don't know what to say. And that is always so surprising to me, right? Like, a lot of times when people ask me to introduce myself, I'll ask them, right? Like, do you want the long version or the short version? Because I can give the abridged version, right? The very easy version, or I can get a little more in depth, right? But like, which one do you want? And that to me is just so interesting to hear that, but also to know that there's someone out there who will help you with that. So, like if you feel like you're struggling with that, I would definitely encourage you to reach out to Suzy and just understand, like, here's what I'm having trouble with. Like, if you're not getting clients and you don't know how to introduce yourself, that would be a great thing to connect with Suzy on, because having that introduction is key, especially if you're at networking events, right? Because there's so many places to connect with people, right? Social media is just one out of just many, many, right? So if you're at a networking event and it's your turn to step up, and whether it's virtual or in person, and say, hi, my name is blah, 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 and this is what I do, right? You've got, like, I don't know, 7 to 10 seconds to keep people's attention, right? And if you're fumbling over your words for those first 5 to 7 seconds, they're gone. They're not going to remember you. But if you can confidently come up and say, yeah, hi, my name's Maggie. I'm a business coach. I help women move out of chaos and into clarity, where I work on their business with them, right? And you keep that kind of ear catching, those earworms where people are like, oh, wow, that's interesting. I would love to know more. That can be huge for people.
Yeah, it's also a confidence builder. When
Mm-hmm.
you know who you are and what you do, and you say it in a very clear and confident way, and this has happened with one of my clients. She's getting people interested in working with her, and she hasn't even finished building. She doesn't even have her bank account set up to collect money. But
Yeah.
it's because she knows so clearly what she wants to do. And
Mm-hmm.
when she's talking to people, they're asking her and she's telling them, and they're like, "Can I have a call with you?" And she's like, Suzy, I got to set, because her and I are working together now. And she's like, okay, we may have to jump to the finance section sooner, because I might have to get, like, because people actually, and I'm like, yeah,
Right.
because you don't have to. And that's one thing that I love to make clear for people is you don't have to finish your plan to go out and sell.
Right.
And you don't have to have everything in place to go out and sell. Like, you can
Mm-hmm.
start selling as soon as you know what you're doing, who you're doing it for, and how much you charge. Once you
Mm-hmm.
know those things, then we can work on all the other stuff in the background.
Right.
And if somebody wants to hire you, then I can help you set up
Mm-hmm.
your bank account, set up your payment processing, whatever.
Right.
And then you can just keep working on your plan as you're working with clients. That's
Mm-hmm.
totally okay. And I think that's where people go, ooh, business plan, I don't need that, because they're thinking, I have to do this huge plan that's like 1,000 pages long. It takes forever, and I can't
Right.
start my business until it's all done. And then it has to be right. No,
Mm-hmm.
it's just to get your creative juices flowing. And 9 times out of 10, it's going to change before you finish it anyway. And that's totally okay.
Right.
It's just to get you going and, like, have those key things so that you can start selling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I love that so much. So tell us something challenging that you have overcome in your business, and what was the effect of that challenging thing?
Yeah. One of the biggest challenges that I had when I started is that I had a vision in my mind of what I wanted to do, but I didn't do any market research. And so it was my workbook. So I wrote a workbook, and it's for sale. It's on my website. Great workbook, very comprehensive. I think it's too comprehensive a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to try to sell it, but it's $37. So it's not expensive, but it's a lot of work for somebody by themselves. And I didn't
Mm-hmm.
realize that, because I have all this knowledge that I already carry with me, and I dumped it into a workbook, and I'm like, and I did send it out to people to test it. And the feedback I got was, I can't do this by myself. It's too
Mm-hmm.
hard.
Yeah.
And that's how I ended up doing one-on-one coaching. I was like, okay, they need more help
Mm-hmm.
to go through this than to just fill it out. So I think that was because that was my main thing that I wanted to get started with. I was like, I just want to sell this workbook and support people, and, kind of launch that way, and then work it into, and again, this is a good lesson, because it taught me what the need was. I
Right.
didn't realize, if I would have just launched one-on-one coaching, then I
Mm-hmm.
may not have known what to do there, because
Right.
I didn't have I was working on my plan.
Right.
So again, I was doing my plan as I wrote the workbook, and then I followed the workbook myself to
Mm-hmm.
really build my business plan. And I had to change it, because I was like, the workbook by itself is a little too comprehensive. It's a little bit too challenging for the type of people that I'm working with. Some people love it, download it, go through it, and they're like fine.
Right.
But they have experience with business.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say the workbook is good for people who have some experience in business. They've done a little bit. You could probably go through the workbook. You'd have places where there's a lot of thought provoking stuff
Mm-hmm.
that you really do have to slow down and go, But for someone like you who's been in business for, you know, 16 years plus,
Right.
the workbook would be a great place for you to just reevaluate and just go, okay, I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to go through all these sections and really streamline what I'm doing. Maybe you're making a change or something like that. But I
Right.
didn't realize that at the time. And I
Mm-hmm.
want to tell people that's okay.
Yeah. Yes.
At the time, it was discouraging. I actually
Yeah.
felt bad. I was like, oh, I thought the workbook would be easy and people would
Right.
just like fly through it and it'd be no big deal. And so it was discouraging. I was like, oh, now I got to reevaluate. Like, how am I going to help people with this? Because I still want to reach people. I still want to
Mm-hmm.
help them with their business plan, but
Yeah.
I had to reevaluate. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. And, I feel like some of those challenges that you overcome in business, you either like, right, you come up to this challenge, you kind of face it, you get through it, you're on the other side, and you either are like, okay, I need to reevaluate, or you're like, nope, I'm done, right? Like this is too hard, right? And I think a lot of people get stuck there. And when I started this podcast, that was some of the like plan behind it, was to help show people that yeah, you can go through hard things in your business and you can come out the other end and keep going, right? And I think what you just explained there, I love that you had to face that challenge, because I feel like it just gave you what gave you so much market research without really realizing it, right? Like not doing the market research first, putting that out into the world, and then having the feedback be, this is too much, right? That gave you so much more market research than you realized.
Yeah.
And I think to me, it's fascinating that people go through coaching schools, and this was like this in the yoga community, and I'm sure in the photography community as well. But in the yoga community, so I had a yoga teacher training, and part of that yoga teacher training was definitely me leading people through their business plan without realizing that that's where they needed to be. And I think that is something that really, as I started my coaching business and started getting deeper into like, what do I want to do? That was the problem I realized, was that there's all these coaching certifications out there and they maybe spend 1 or 2 hours on business. It was the same in yoga teacher training, where it was like, you're only quote unquote allowed to talk about business for like 2 hours. Now, I definitely broke that rule. There's like there's a quote unquote governing body in the yoga community, but they don't like check on you. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to teach you guys about business, because I want you to feel confident when you leave this teacher training that yes, you know how to teach a class, but that yes, you also know how to run the business, right? That you know how to do some of that stuff, like invoicing, like approaching people to come to class, approaching studios to, right, teach in those places. And that's just one example of like how how I saw that in the yoga community. And then I got into the coaching community. I'm like, it's the same thing.
Yeah. And
It's the same
and
thing.
okay, I have a 4-year business degree and none of the business degree showed me how to do any of what you just said.
That too. Yes. Yeah.
So
And that is amazing
I
too.
can go work in, I know I can go work in a corporation and know exactly what they're doing because they have
Mm-hmm.
all these departments. They're all set up. I
Right.
could totally do that. But drop me in front of a laptop and say, now do it all by yourself.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, I don't have all these departments doing their thing, and
Right.
like doing their, like it's me.
Yep.
Okay, so now I have to know every single department. I have to know every single thing, how to sell, how to market, how to do finances, how to visualize, how to come up with new concepts, how to price things, how to reprice things, how to talk
Right.
to people. Like It's like an endless thing of learning. Yeah,
It is.
totally get
It
that.
is. And I think it's so overwhelming. And I understand that in coaching training, you only have so much time because like I mean, even, almost 2 decades into being an entrepreneur, there are still things that I am learning that I'm like, I did not know this existed. I was talking to someone the other day and she's also a business coach and she started talking about KPIs and SWOT analysis. And she's like, well, clearly everybody knows that. And I'm like, I didn't know what a SWOT analysis was until I was forced to do it so that I could have a teacher training in 2016. I had no clue what that was. And at the time when I did it, I was like, this is pointless. I am the only yoga teacher training within an hour, right? Within like 75 miles. What do I need this for? Right. So I didn't like understand it. I kind of rushed through it. And now, after I've done it, I see the importance of it. But there's other aspects where I'm like, I also didn't do KPIs for any of my business. I kind of know what they are. Should I look into them? Yeah, maybe. But not everyone is going to want to, right?
Well,
So,
and yeah, and
yeah,
the KPIs and the SWOT analysis, and I always tell people this, it's not for the beginner.
right.
When
Yeah.
you first start out, you don't need all that stuff. No, you
No.
don't need to know it, but you do have to graduate to it. So
Yes.
it's like as your business grows and you get
Mm-hmm.
to a certain point, then you want to take on these other things. Because for those of you listening that don't know, KPIs are key performance indicators, and they can be applied to anything that you want to watch how it's doing. So it can be used in finance, it can be used in marketing, and it can be used everywhere. You pick what you want to watch. You
Mm-hmm.
pick so that you can see, like podcasting, for example. Maggie and I are podcasters. So
Right.
we might want a KPI on how many listeners we have, how many
Mm-hmm.
downloads of people, whatever. So it's a lot of data, and it's a lot. People are like, I don't need it. When you first start out, you don't. But
Right.
as you grow, then you want to start watching it. It's kind of
Mm-hmm.
like, I like to explain it to the beginner as it's like seeing how many likes you have on social media.
It is. Yeah. And
That is a KPI.
right. And I've also found that if you talk about it in reference of like insights, right? People understand like insights on Facebook or Instagram, right? And you are like, oh, okay. Yeah. So I was talking to a woman a few weeks ago and she said to me, well, we were talking about the professional mode on Facebook, right? About how you can see a lot more, just insights into what is happening. And we were talking and talking and I'm like, and I was realizing it as we were talking. I'm like, this is a KPI. And I've been watching, right, my insights on Facebook slowly climb and my reach slowly climb. And I'm like, I bet if I would start talking about KPIs as insights, people would start to go, oh, that's so interesting. Right. Even
Yeah.
myself, right? I think about KPI and I'm like, I know what it stands for, but I like have to dig sometimes in my brain of like, what does that stand for? But you tell me insights and I'm like, yeah, I know exactly what that is. So
Yeah. Or
sometimes it's,
podcast
yeah,
listeners. That's a
right.
KPI. Like
Yep.
we're looking at our stats, if you're
Mm-hmm.
just looking at how many people are paying attention to me,
Right.
and when I do a certain thing, do those go up or down?
Yeah. Yes.
And that
Yes.
helps you with knowing, because if you're just doing over and over again and you don't
Mm-hmm.
know how it's impacting,
Right.
then you could be doing stuff needlessly. You could
Mm-hmm.
be spending so much time and energy posting a certain thing over and over again, and nobody sees it, nobody's watching it, nobody's doing anything with it, and
Mm-hmm.
you're just doing it without, and you could be doing something else.
Right. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. Okay. So this actually leads really well into the next question, which is what is one business tip that you would tell someone who is starting their journey or that feels kind of just stuck in the chaos of business?
I always answer this question the same because I'm the kindergarten teacher. And how many times did you have to write out the alphabet and repeat it over and over again? And repetition
Mm-hmm.
is key. So there's two main things that I tell people, and it doesn't matter if you've already started your business or if you're thinking about starting a business. Write out the vision of what you want your final business to look like. What do you,
Mm-hmm.
in a perfect world, if you could wave a magic wand, what does your business look like? and how are you functioning in it? So when you get up in the morning, what does it feel like? What are you
Mm-hmm.
doing? How are you embracing the day? What are the types of things that you're physically doing in your business? And this is removing any of the limitations. Money is not a
Yeah.
limitation. Doesn't matter how many people you're hiring. It doesn't matter who's doing what. You can build it however you want it. And you just write that out. The next thing I'm going to say is write out your why.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you
Yep.
have this beautiful business that you just visioned? Why are you doing this? Why in the world am I on this podcast with Maggie?
Mm-hmm.
Why am I doing what I'm doing? Why do I tell people this is who I am and what I do? What's the
Yeah.
purpose behind it?
Mm-hmm.
Two things. That's it. That's all.
Yeah.
Anybody can do that. A pen and piece of paper.
Yes.
It's free.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I would add to that like your why, and only because when I talk to people, this is kind of a standard answer that I get. I'll ask them like, what is your why? Like, why are you in business? So many people will be like, because of my kids, because of my family. And I'm like, well, that's great. That's very noble. But why? Like, there are levels that are much deeper
Let's
than
go
that.
deeper.
Like, go deeper, go deeper. Like, what is that feeling inside of you? Even if it's something that you can't really explain, that it's like, I feel joy and peace and happiness and like things like that, where it's kind of those like root feelings of like, well, I feel lighter. I feel expansive. I feel like I'm touching and like connecting with everyone that I'm supposed to. Like, that's your why, right? Your family is like one of those supporting things, and even like finances, right? Like, I want to be a millionaire. Okay, but like why? What is underneath that why? And there are times where when I've connected with clients, like we've spent an entire hour just kind of digging into that, into why, the why and the vision, and like, and so I call those core values. And I think that for me, that has been one of the best exercises that I have done in any of my business, is to understand my core values. And I guess they've probably kind of shifted over the years. They've gotten deeper over the years, I would say, right? Where now, like, if I can feel a deep sense of joy and peace and sustainability and security, I know I'm going in the right direction. When I like have envisioned and like felt those things in my body, and like, especially when I get into a place where I'm like, this isn't working, I want to burn it all down, right? Like, typical entrepreneur, like, how can I come back to those like core feelings of like, okay, happiness, joy, peace, sustainability, like bring that back. What does that feel like in my body? And what is one thing I can do right now to bring back some of that feeling, right? To get me back onto the road, onto that roadmap that we talked about in the beginning.
Yeah. And I love that you said that. I support every single thing that you said, because when you have those core values and those feelings and you're feeling it, all the other things come. The money will
Yeah.
come, the clients will come, that you're generating that high vibration of I'm doing what I'm purposeful in the world for. Like, this is
Mm-hmm.
why I'm here. And that's why when I have I have my clients write this out, and then I ask them to write it out again, and they're like, you already asked me that. And I'm like, no, you cannot write it out too many times. Because
Mm-hmm.
like you said, it can shift. Like, you might
Mm-hmm.
go deeper.
Right.
Like, the first time you wrote it might be more surfacey, like
Mm-hmm.
family and money and time
Right.
flexibility and whatever. Now we're going to write it again. And now, why family and why
Mm-hmm.
time, and what are you going to do with
Yeah.
those things? And let's go down that and get a little bit deeper and a little bit deeper. And as you work with people, the same thing. The more I
Mm-hmm.
work with clients, my why shifts, because I'm like, ooh, I can really help them in this one area that I
Right.
didn't realize. And that builds up my joy and my peace, because I'm like, ooh, now I have something that I can work with them on even more.
Right.
And like, I mean, we're on this podcast, it's Sunday, and I'm like, yeah, I get to talk about my business. Of course I'm going to do it, because
Right.
I love what I do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and when you can show up, and no matter what day of the week, no matter what time, and you can show up and you have those really basic things in place where you're like, yes, I love getting to talk about what I do. I love getting to talk about who I serve. And I love knowing that whoever is out there listening to this, right, when it comes out, like they are going to get so much, whether that's inspiration or education or entertainment, right? They're going to walk away from this knowing, like, ooh, I'm inspired to go do this, right? Like maybe someone is walking away from this inspired to go work on their core values, right? And to come back to that why of like, why am I here? And a lot of people that I've met and connected with, they've never gone over their why. They've never written out their final business vision. And I'm like, and I was one of those people who hadn't written out like a final business vision, right? That like, I don't want to call it an end goal because I feel like it's always kind of shifting and evolving, but
Mhm.
like that place where you kind of like sit down and you're like, wow, like looking back, right? Reminiscing and thinking about like, holy cow, I've come so far, right? And like I get goosebumps thinking about that, right? Where it's
I
like, oh,
know, I know. It's like
wow.
it's like they're like milestones in your
Yeah,
journey because you never really do. Like you said, why would I write an exit plan? It's like, well, you do have to have one because if you ever do want to step out or heaven forbid something happens
right.
drastically where
Mm-hmm.
you have no choice,
Right.
then yeah, you kind of have to be able to tell people what to do. Like, how do I do that?
Right.
Because it's a business and it's attached to
Mm-hmm.
the IRS and all that stuff. Like, yeah, that it
Right.
makes it a little bit more challenging. So it's hard to think about that. But I love that you said that it's not an end result.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a vision that's out there that is a starter place. It's like, and it can change and evolve, and it can be a milestone for you where you're like, oh, like I finishing my workbook. That was the first milestone. It took me 2 months to write it. And when I
Mm-hmm.
finally hit that finish and I downloaded it to a PDF and I was like, it's done. Oh my, and now I'm looking at it going, I need to reevaluate. I think I'm going to break it
Right.
up and make it this smaller. That's business. Like it's
Yeah.
going to change and that's totally okay. So I love
Mm-hmm.
that you said that it's not an end result. It's just
Mm-hmm.
a vision out there that you
Right.
need to start with. It just gets you
Mm-hmm.
going.
Right. But when you think about like the mindset of business in general, and I have said this before, and this will be the hill that I die on. Business is like 80 to 90% mindset and 10 to 20% data. And like business in itself is data. It is data points. You can graph it, you can put it in a spreadsheet, but everything else is all of the stuff up in your mind, all of those little thoughts going, are you sure that's what you want to do? Are you sure someone's going to buy that thing? Are you sure you should create this podcast? Are you sure you want to talk about that on social media? Right? All of those thoughts are the limiting beliefs that will try to hold you back, right? But when you can come back to this vision, this why of like, you know what, showing up in these places brings me immense joy. I know that someone is out there listening to this, they're inspired, they're writing down notes, or I'm connecting with people, I'm getting to interview amazing business owners and doing all this really cool stuff. Like that gets me so excited to be like, I can't wait to like have more interviews. I can't wait to connect with more people. Um, and that can be part of your vision, right? That kind of ever evolving vision of like, I didn't think that in the beginning of the year, I would be, creating a podcast and like, I didn't think I would love it as much as I do. But here we are, like 9, almost 10 months into it for my podcast. And I'm like, how can I do this more?
You know what's funny is you and I did you start in December?
I started in January. So I actually started,
Yeah. So
yeah, I went to a networking meeting the first week of January, and like the topic was like, what is something big and scary you're going to do this year? And it literally got around to me in the room and I was like unmuted and I without hesitation said, I'm going to start a podcast. That was not what I was planning to say, right? But I unmuted and I was like, I'm going to start a podcast. I'm pretty sure it's going to be, like solo episodes and interview episodes. And I'm really excited. It's going to be called Chaos to Clarity. And I'm literally like hearing these words escape my mouth. And I'm like, what are you doing? You you do not have a plan here, which is not like totally uncharacteristic of me to like just fly by the seat of my pants. But also after I finished that, I had almost everyone on the meeting who are really great referral partners and collaboration partners. They all said, how can I sign up to be an interview guest? And I was like,
Yeah. So
give me a minute.
I love that, Maggie, because I started my podcast similarly without any plan. And I want to touch on this because people hear, oh, Suzy, you do business planning. You probably plan everything up. No, inspiration. So 80 to 90% of business is mindset. It's those limiting beliefs. It's what's holding you back. Like you just have to get past that, do what you have to do. I actually coach around trauma energetics. So I work with my clients when they have past trauma that's blocking them and making it harder for them. So that's a piece, but it's also inspiration. So if you get inspired, and like what you just described to me was inspiration, like your essential self, the internal Maggie was like, I'm going to start a podcast. That's what I need to do. That's who I need to be. And thought intellectual Maggie was like, what are you doing?
Yeah, literally, like
why are you doing that?
So many messages on that Zoom call, and I had to turn my camera off because I was like, oh my gosh, what did I just
what
do?
am I gonna do? Yeah,
what am I gonna do?
So my podcast starting story is similar in the fact that I was looking for places to be a guest. So I'm like, I gotta get out there. I gotta share what I do, whatever. Yeah. I could not find the type of shows that I wanted to be a guest on. And so I'm like, and I tell my clients this, if you don't find what you need, then you need to create it.
Yes.
And I was like, you know what? I got to do my own because I can't find what I'm looking for. So let me do my own. And I just did a little research, found something that was free. I'm like, I'm not going to spend any money because I don't know if I'm be good at it. What if it's horrible? Like, whatever. So I picked something that was free to do, and I just hit record. And I was like, here we go. No plan, no strategy, no nothing. And then I posted in a Facebook group for podcasters. I'm like, here's what my podcast is. I'm looking for these types of and I had over 100 people reply like you. I was like, oh no, now I have to do it. Yes. I'm like, oh man. And I did by the seat of my pants. Same thing. Didn't have any equipment, didn't have. So for those people listening, it's okay to not have an official strategy plan like in place before you do things. What I like to encourage people is if you're going to do something like launch an entire business, you have to think about it.
Yeah. Yes.
Have some stuff in place, that some ideas of what it is you want to do, how you're going to do it, who you're doing it for, how much you charge, like the basics. Kindergarten.
Right. Yeah.
Don't skip kindergarten.
Right. Yes. Yeah, for sure. For sure. And I definitely like when the clients I work with are basically, like the trajectory of a client would be like you've worked with them and then they come to me, right? And I know we've talked about this on other calls before where like, okay, they've got all the basics with you and then they come to me and we start honing in on some of those skills. We start honing in on like, okay, there are, 50, 60, 100 different ways to connect with clients. Like, where do you want to start? Pick one or two, right? Out of this, I have a list of 54 places to connect with clients. So let's choose one or two and we're going to work on those. And we're going to start creating conversations. We're going to start talking to people, whether that is getting on podcasts and being a guest or creating your own podcast and putting out that into the universe or creating content on social media and connecting with people through your content, right? Like, doesn't matter where, but now it's time to turn on the open sign, open up your front door, right? And come outside on the sidewalk and say, I've just baked this fresh batch of cookies. I would love to offer you one, right? I have more inside for sale, but here's a sample, right? That's essentially what social media is for a business owner, is like the sample platter, right? When you go to Costco and there's just hors d'oeuvres everywhere.
Yes. And you know what? 9 times out of 10, you're sampling something that you're going to buy.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And the more you can talk to people, the more you can have those conversations about, oh, this is what I do. I get really excited and I can't wait to talk to people about it. People are going to remember that, right? They're also going to remember if you're like, oh yeah, well, I kind of do this and I kind of do that, right? People are going to remember that and go, I don't have anyone to send to that person. But if you're really excited about it and you're like, yeah, I help women create conversations and grow their business, people are going to remember that and go, that girl was so excited about talking to people and helping others learn to talk to people, right?
Yeah, and that's a huge thing too, is referrals. So even if you're like the DM thing, you could have people saying no to you, but you know what? They know 5, 6, 7, maybe 10 people who would say yes to you.
Right.
And so knowing how to tell people this is what I do and who I am, even if you have a no, if they can remember you saying who you are and what you do, they're going to go tell people.
Right.
And how many times do you get people sharing your social media content?
Yeah.
That's something, it's building those relationships. They're not every single person you talk to is an ideal client, and that's okay. It's that letting people know who you are and what you do. And we are in this age of so much noise on the internet. It can be discouraging, but at the same time, that's what those personal conversations, whether it's a DMs or you're in a networking group or you're talking to a friend, having coffee, the lady that sold you the coffee, you're telling her what you do. It doesn't matter. It's like just telling people what you do, because they may have somebody in the back of their mind that just says, oh, my cousin so-and-so needs to talk to you. Or I have this coworker that's, making your coffee, doesn't want to work here anymore. She's been complaining about it all day, like you never know.
Right. Yes. Oh, I love that. I feel like I could go on forever. So let's get to the last. I mean, I definitely know I can go on forever. So my last question today is, if you were a kitchen utensil or gadget, what would you be and why?
Oh, this is such a good, you know what? You may have to like edit the huge pause because I have to really think about this one. Kitchen gadget or utensil. Man, the first thing that the stuff that comes up to my mind is mixing things. And I think it's because a mixer or some sort of whisk or something that mixes things together is that you have a bunch of ingredients, all these separate things that alone they really don't do much, but when you put them all together and you mix them, then they become something. And I feel like that's what I do. I take your vision, your marketing, your operations, your finance, all these pieces of a business separately, they don't really help you. But when you put them all together, then you actually have a business.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that so much. So I'll drop all your links below, but definitely tell everyone right now, what is the best way to connect with you?
Yeah. So I always send people to my website. My podcast link is on my website. All of my social media links are on my website. There's so much information that you'll get. It's SuzyWraines.com, and it's SuzyWrAines.com. And I'm actively on Facebook and LinkedIn are the two main places that I'm at. You can find me if you search my name.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. I'm so excited. This was such a great conversation, and I can't wait for everyone to listen into this.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Maggie. It's been so much fun.
Wow, what a great interview. Thank you so much for showing up here on the Chaos to Clarity podcast. Again, my name is Maggie. I'm so excited to connect with you. You can find all of the information, all of the links below in the show notes for today's interview. And I hope you have the best day ever.